by the way?
I don't know the population.
At all?
No, I don't know the population.
You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
Well, why is
because
that
if
relevant?
you don't know anything about the country...
I didn't say I don't know anything about
Okay, what's the ethnic mix of Iran?
They are Persians and predominantly Shia. Okay, this is cute.
It's not
okay.
even, you don't know anything about Iran. So
okay, I am not the Tucker Carlson expert on Iran.
You're a senator who's calling for the overthrow of the government.
You're the one who
don't know anything about the country.
No, you don't know anything about the country.
The rift between Republicans over Iran on full display right there as Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, who has been a strong supporter of military action, and Tucker Carlson, who has been very much opposed, sparring during an interview there. That went on for quite some time.
Well, as you know, though, I mean, there's precedent to this because, you know, before...
And Tucker Carlson, who has been very much opposed, sparring during an interview there. That went on for quite some time.
Well, as you know, though, I mean, there's precedent to this because, you know, before, Jonathan Lemire, you will remember that before Dwight Eisenhower launched the D-Day attacks on June 6th, 1944, Ike got him on a transatlantic phone call and was actually peppering him with trivial pursuit questions about the ethnic makeup of Germany, their population size, and which soccer clubs were having the best seasons over the past 3 years.
Also, we see it in popular culture all the time. I remember, Joe, as I'm sure you do as well.
Yes.
Before Luke Skywalker got on the X-Wing and went after the Death Star run, he was asked how many Imperial troops were on that space station at that time. You have to know these things. You have to know these things. Good for Tucker.
Yeah.
It was, though, to Mika's point, a very contentious interview that did lay out the divide in MAGA world right now.
It sure did.
And I will say, for left-wingers watching that, it was kind of like, staying with the Star Wars analogy, are you for Darth Vader? Or are you for Emperor Palpatine? And, you know, it's a tough call for a lot of them. They did not know. Wait.
I'm going to move on.
Watch this transition. Watch this transition. Speaking of baseball.
There it is.
That's it.
Yankees lose again.
Speaking of the evil
Red Sox win again. Yeah. Red Sox win again. And the Giants, who I randomly started checking in the standings, how many games have they lost in a row?
So the San Francisco Giants have lost 4 straight, including the first 2 with their prized new acquisition, Rafael Devers.
Okay, a lot of names to get to.
That's $125 million per loss. Okay.
Okay, back to the issue at hand. Meanwhile, President Trump continues to consider possible attack plans, telling reporters yesterday, quote, nobody knows what I'm going to do.
Now that, a lot of people say that you can't trust anything Donald Trump says.
Well, a lot of people say
nobody has said that here, of course, but this is one of the most truthful statements he has ever made. Nobody knows what I'm going to do, and they really don't. It could break in either direction.
We're going to bring you the latest reporting out of the White House.
Which is a good thing, by the way.
And on Capitol Hill yesterday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was grilled about possible plans for the Middle East, as well as the deployment of U.S. troops in U.S. cities.
Did you see he threw Jesus under the bus? They all throw Jesus under the bus.
It was very painful.
It's like you get put in the corner, and Jesus is your get out of jail free card. Or, well, I don't believe anything except the Bible. Yeah, okay, well, great. Yeah, we all do, but that's the only thing.
Also
not
ahead,
the Constitution.
This is a big story out of Boston. We're going to go through the verdict in the high-profile retrial of Karen Reed, who had been accused of killing her police officer boyfriend. Danny Savalos will join us with analysis on that case out of Boston that has really gripped much of the country.
So let's go back to our Boston correspondent, Jonathan Lemire. Jonathan, it's hard really to explain to people that don't follow true crime trials like this or aren't in the Boston area just how huge this case was for those two sections, for New England and also for people who follow true crime stories. They have been locked on this case. I've heard them talking sort of in the periphery for several years now.
Yeah, and it's broken through to the point where it's even on the front page of the New York Post today, not the main headline, but it is here as well. Yeah, this was the story up there. I remember being few months back, or it was last year, during the first trial, being on the Mass Pike and driving by like an overpass, one of the above the highway, signs were being flown on both sides of the Karen Reed trial. There was crowds, we'll show them later, I'm sure, of hundreds of people gathered outside the courthouse waiting for the verdict. It had become this sort of, for someone who's not a celebrity, it was being covered like a celebrity trial. And then we had the retrial this weekend, this last couple of weeks, with a split verdict, but she was acquitted of the larger, more serious charges.
All right, let's get to our top story this morning. President Trump still weighing his options on how to deal with Iran. Yesterday morning, he told reporters he has not yet made a final decision, saying Iran has suggested coming to the White House for talks, but it might be too late.
Iran's got a lot of trouble, and they want to negotiate. And I said, why didn't you negotiate with me before all this death and destruction? Why didn't you negotiate? I said to the people, why didn't you negotiate with me 2 weeks ago? You could have done fine. You would have had a country. Unconditional, sir. That means I've had it. Okay, I've had it. I give up. No more. Then we go blow up all the, all the nuclear stuff that's all over the place. Look, nothing's finished until it's finished. War is very complex. A lot of bad things can happen. A lot of turns are made. So I don't know. I wouldn't say that we won anything yet. I would say that we sure as hell made a lot of progress. And we'll see. The next week is going to be very big, maybe less than a week, maybe less.
We've got David Ignatius here. We're going to be going to him in a second. But I will say you parse through all of that, and what you see is somebody who still may be looking for a deal and who is acknowledging what everybody who's seriously looking at this knows, that, as David said yesterday, it just starts with the bombing of Iran.
No, that's
the spin-off from this, I'm not going to even say could be, it most likely would be just as messy as what happened after you replaced a regime in Iraq.
Well, Iran denies ever asking to meet at the White House, writing in a statement, quote, Iran does not negotiate under duress.
That is not true. They will negotiate under duress to save their regime if they can.
The president did meet with security advisors in the Situation Room yesterday. As for the situation on the ground, Iran and Israel are still trading fire. Earlier this morning, an Iranian missile struck a hotel in southern Israel, though Iranian officials say they were hospital, sorry, not a hotel, though Iranian officials say they were aiming for a nearby military site. The direct hit caused extensive damage to the facility and seriously injured at least 6 people. Several residential buildings in Tel Aviv were hit as well, injuring at least 47 people. According to the Times of Israel, the Israeli military says Iran launched roughly 30 ballistic missiles this morning. In Iran, Israel hit a heavy water reactor early this morning. At a news conference yesterday, an Israeli military spokesperson said the IDF had launched 3 waves of aerial attacks from Tuesday into Wednesday. The waves involved dozens of warplanes dispatched to strike over 60 targets in Tehran and in western Iran, citing a Washington-based Iranian.
Held a Tennessee law banning gender-affirming care for transgender youth. In a 6-3 ruling, the court said the state can continue to enforce a ban on hormone therapy and other treatments for minors. The court's 3 liberal justices dissented, writing the decision could have tragic consequences. The case was first brought to the court by transgender children and their parents who claimed the ban discriminated on the basis of sex. The court applied the lowest level of legal scrutiny to the case, concluding the law does not unconstitutionally discriminate. Joining us now is NBC News and MSNBC legal analyst Danny Savalas. Danny, walk us through Chief Justice Roberts' opinion on this and how this decision could impact the 24 other states that have enacted similar laws.
On the Equal Protection Clause, the number one question is, how does this law classify people? Does it classify people based on their membership in a protected or suspect class? That would be something like race, for example. Or does it classify you based on virtually anything else in the universe? And in this case, if it's based on anything other than those suspect classes, then you apply a kind of scrutiny. We've heard that word scrutiny a lot, called rational basis. And the shorthand for what we were taught in law school is that if rational basis applies, the law is going to survive, because you can come up with virtually any rational reason for a law. And in this case, That first question was answered, no, this law doesn't discriminate against people based on their sex or their membership in a transgender protected class, because there is no such transgender protected class yet. And so therefore, it discriminates only based on medical diagnosis and also age. And those are not protected classes. Therefore, the lowest level of scrutiny applies, and therefore the law survives.
So in other words, some law would have to be passed, perhaps federally, that would say transgender is a protected class.
It could be recognized by the court, and that's really actually quietly what I think is a more significant part of this decision is the second step. They never reached the second step here. They first decide that it doesn't discriminate against any suspect class. So therefore, the inquiry ends. But the next step would have been, well, what if it did discriminate based on sex or transgender? Therefore, you go to the next step. And Amy Coney Barrett wrote a separate opinion saying, look, if we were forced to reach this, we would conclude, or I would conclude, that transgender would not be a protected class. Because, and the rationale is, this usually applies to immutable characteristics, something you are since birth. And Barrett reasons that this is transgender status is something that is more fluid and not necessarily known at birth. Therefore, if the issue ever gets to the Supreme Court on whether transgender is a protected or suspect class, it seems that this court might decide that answer in the negative.
Well, that's a lot to unpack, but we're going to switch topics quickly. While we have you, the court is still awaiting a decision on birthright citizenship. That's the biggie. We heard arguments last month. How are things looking for this ruling?
Yeah, this case is about birthright citizenship, but not really. It's really about something else. It's about nationwide injunctions. And that's because it's something very common with the Trump administrations is that they fire out all these executive orders, and then a bunch of people rush to court to get what are called stays or injunctions. Hey, court, put this executive order on hold while we litigate the merits of the case. And this is one of those cases, but really at issue here is whether district courts, the lowest level trial courts in the federal system, whether they, in their little district, can issue a nationwide injunction that affects people across the country. And actually, quietly, this may be a more important issue than birthright citizenship. You could argue that birthright citizenship affects a smaller class than all of the United States, which is affected by a single court issuing a nationwide injunction. So the court, at least this time around, may not even reach the constitutional issue of birthright citizenship.
It is a big deal. Dennis Valos, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. That